Greetings. I am Dr. J. Harrell Sims, CEO of Harrell Kagler Interventions Incorporated, professor of many things. And welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we have a very unique show. And I say unique because you're going to learn today. I have a wonderful guest, my brother. I want to introduce you to the subject. The subject is very important for us in this time because we are at a point in society in our story that we have got to figure some things out. So today's topic is the challenges to our unity in a time of crisis. Questions of who we are and what that means. Sounds deep already. I want to introduce to you my guest, Brother Shuja Baker. He's a lifelong student of African history and culture and the co-founder of the African Restoration Project, which is an African history and culture study group that was hosted weekly. They had their sessions in Long Beach and Pomona for over a decade. He now hosts quarterly events in Los Angeles. Now, professionally, this brother is a mechanical and electromechanical product and system design consultant with over 30 years of experience in product and system design. Also product manufacturing and visual media development and related computer technology. He operates a company named Virtual Design and Prototyping where he offers engineering design, prototyping, production, manufacturing services. He does so much. He just does so much. He also operates a Kwanzaa themed website, and that website is www.kwanzaa.net, where he shares the message and meaning of Kwanzaa and offers a series of Kwanzaa and African cultural products that he himself manufactures. He's also a freelance writer. He's had his writings published in the Los Angeles Sentinel, the City News, Ohio, and other Black media outlets. He is most recently just completed a chapter for an anthology of the influence of Dr. Malana Karanga's intellectual work through Kawaida and the Nguzo Saba, all right, where he co-focused on Kawaida ethical teachings for applied STEM, science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing. He is currently writing a book, and he is a devoted husband and father. He has so many things. I can't say it all, so I had to kind of read it. Before we get started, I just want to say, have a seat. Have two seats. Because it's going to get deep up in here. He is a very important part of Harrell Kagler Interventions Incorporated, and we are forever grateful for having this brother even share space with us. Welcome, Brother Shuja.
Welcome, Dr. Sister, or Sister Doctor, as you prefer. It's a pleasure to be with you today, as always.
So
I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, so am I, and I'm sure a lot of people are. And if you haven't heard any real intellectualism in a while, you want to stay tuned. Like I said, don't just have one seat, have two. Pull up some of your friends. This is going to get deep. Now, the challenges to our unity in a time of crisis. Questions of who we are and what that means. I'm going to start with this question. What are some of the challenges?
What are some of the challenges?
Yes.
That we're facing right now? Well, of course, we're in the midst of a pandemic or a pandemic, depending on what your perspective is. So we have the challenges that we faced before, this thing unfolded early this year, compounded by all of the added challenges that go along with it. And for me, it has focused particular attention on our failures to bring ourselves together in unity in the way that we needed to prior to the pandemic. Because of course, trying to build unity during the pandemic is a greater challenge than outside of. But finding us in this time right now, we're facing, of course, institutional racism, facing police brutality. We're facing all types of political and economic issues and matters. And then, of course, we're facing all of this confusion around COVID and what's really going on and what it means for us, and perhaps most importantly, what's happening next. So all of those things are challenges that we're facing now. And I could go on, but I want you to lead the conversation. I want you to lead the conversation.
To me, that I think we all would know what those challenges are, but some of us have had our heads stuck in the sand, and that's a big problem for us. One of the biggest questions, because I listen to a lot of speakers. I just recently read some of your work. Awesome, fantastic, phenomenal work. I listen to a few people. I listen to Tariq Nasheed. I listen to Grandmaster Jay. I listen to Dr. Claude Anderson, Dr. Boyce Watkins. Young brother Riza Islam. I mean, I listen to so many different people, and there's so many different philosophies. Dane Calloway, and the one thing I was just listening to today, and Grandmaster Jay stated, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's from INFAC. He said, we have so many different things that we believe. What the first thing we need to do is just be Black. So the question is, who are we, and what does that mean? What is your take on who we are?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and one that we have to address individually and collectively, right? I began asking the question maybe 15 years ago, what is a Black person? I had been inspired. I forget what the original, I remember what the original inspiration was. It was my going back and rereading the autobiography of Malcolm X and revisiting Minister Malcolm's teachings post-Mecca and his evolution and all that meant. Because when I read that stuff initially, it rubbed me the wrong way, like it did a lot of other people. I wasn't used to that Minister Malcolm, somebody talking about, can we all get along? Can we find a way, to deal with that? I was used to the fire prophet. So when I read that initially years ago, I kind of put that to the side, and had too much respect for Malcolm to completely dismiss it. But I figured it was something deeper that I couldn't process at the time. I didn't even want to process. But then in my rereading of it years later, I began to see that differently. His teachings about how we needed to not only deal with white supremacy, but we needed to deal with race ideology as a whole. So that prompted me to start thinking about how we define and understand ourselves in the context of race ideology as Black people. Right? Our ancestors didn't understand themselves that way. That's an identity that we have that was first thrust upon us, and then that we eventually embraced with some redefinition. But nevertheless, it falls within the framework of race ideology. So I became interested. Since we are regarded as a distinct group amongst ourselves, I began looking for a definition for Blackness that defines us to the exclusion of everybody else. In other words, a definition for Blackness that applies to all Black people and nobody else. And I even wrote about that because I ultimately was unable to find an answer to that question. And that was consistent with Minister Malcolm's teachings and with my understanding more broadly, our understanding more broadly, because we all know that race ideology is a social construct. It was conceived, it was made up, it's an idea that came into fruition in the 17th century. 17th century?
Yes,
Blumenbach.
Blumenbach.
Yeah.
Yes.
To justify what was happening here, right? It's not based in biology. It's not based in anything that's tangible aside from people's perception, right? So as I looked for a definition for Blackness that applies to all Black people, I couldn't find it. And then that caused me to recognize that the conception of Blackness that most people embrace is a diminished conception of Blackness. It's, the Blackness that has us believing that our history began with enslavement. The concept of blackness that has us believing that, you know, our physical capabilities are our greatest contribution to, you know, human history. You know, our athleticism, our ability to dance, our flow, you know, our swag, you know, that type of thing. So it's what I did as my thoughts continued on it. What began to occur to me was that not only is there no single definition for blackness that exists that captures all black people, but that as I began asking black people what blackness means to them, what I realized, and this isn't this doesn't take a whole lot of, you know, thought to realize this is true, that black people have distinctly different understanding of what blackness means. In other words, if you ask a dozen black people, what does it mean to be black? You can expect up to a dozen different answers. And not only can you expect different answers, but you can expect different emotional response, right? As I went around over the years asking that question, some people just gave me a blank look, like, you know, what's wrong with me? You know, that I have to ask that question. Don't you know? As if, you know, blackness is a foregone conclusion and everybody knows what it means. And to some extent that's true, but that is the diminished conception of blackness that we get as a product of, you know, the American experience and, you know, the diminished status that has us at the lowest rung on the human ladder. What we need, though, is an elevated conception of blackness. Not just one that's elevated, you know, in the sense of how we understand ourselves, how we present ourselves, but one that comes with a criteria for us, meaning a code of behavior, a code of conduct, a code of value, so that your blackness is not just a question of your history or your skin tone, but your blackness is a question of the values that define how you live, how you understand yourself, and how you engage the world. What benefit are you to your community? That needs to be a component in our understanding of ourselves and what it means to be black. So it's a deep question, and certainly it has individual and collective components. And I think more effort has been given to analyzing it from an individual standpoint. Who am I individually? I think that work needs to be done on who we are collectively, and we need to come to a collective understanding of who we are as a people with some expectations to go along with that.
This is very important because, you know, I've been around people from all over the world and teaching. I have students coming from all these different countries, and I've been exposed to different lifestyles and ideologies. And one thing I can say about other groups is they have a code. They don't break the code. You will never find an Asian, you know, disrespecting their women. There's certain things that you'll never find an Asian do. There's certain things that you'll never find somebody from India doing. There's certain things the Latinos won't do. They may not get along. They have their colorism and all these other issues, but there's one thing that they understand about themselves, even though really the only his story that we know is the story that's been taught to us, and the conqueror always writes the story in favor of themselves. So it's really important, because when you first asked me that question, I had to sit back and think about it, because we all have different experiences, but the one experience that we have in common, it doesn't matter. We have to also look at socioeconomic status, because some of us have come from homes where there's some money, middle class or upper middle class. And some of us come from the bottom rung or the working class. And so we see life a little different, but at the same time, we all have this thing in common, is that we're fighting. We're fighting a system that is meant to annihilate us. I can't say it any better than that. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything to make anybody feel good.
Yeah, and that's what we're facing. And I've come to use a sports analogy. to describe how we are engaging this in the context of our not having a collective understanding of who we are and a code. When you talk to those dozen different Black people and ask them what does it mean to be Black, and they each give you differing perceptions of what it means to be who we are, what that amounts to, because we think of ourselves as being on the same team, right? But if we don't operate from a shared perspective, then we're like team members who are operating from different playbooks, right? We have a different focus, which should offer some insight into why we are losing, or why we haven't had sustained victory at the level that we want. Because if we're going to have that type of victory, we got to be operating from a shared playbook. We got to have a shared strategy, right? But if we can't even agree on who we are and what that means, then how can we go forward together effectively, right? That's a recipe for scattered efforts, scattered behavior, or inconsistent behavior, and scattered outcomes, which is what we've been dealing with.
Well, see, that question of who we are the only group that are still trying to find the truth, because it's been hidden from us so much now. And I mentioned some of the people that I listen to. Yes, I do listen to some women. Queen Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. I'm very, Fannie Lou Hamer. I study everyone that speaks to me and helps me to understand some things. We have our diasporic Africans. We have them from Brazil. We have them from, Haiti. We have them from the continent. We have them from London. We are Aboriginal people, so we are original to this whole earth. However, right now there is some things going on. There is ADOS, and then there is foundational Black American, and then there's highly melanated Aboriginal, and then there's Pan-Africanism. And I would say that Pan-Africanism envelops all of that.
Sure.
It's Pan-Africanism. No matter where you are on this planet, no matter where you're originated from, you are still rooted in Africanism. So some of us are, instead of identifying, we're identifying I'm Christian, I'm Democrat. And so we put these titles in front of who we are. So when you ask us who we are, we identify ourselves by what we belong to or we're a part of. And I hear that all the time. And that's what causes the confusion. If we don't know who we are, then we don't know whose we are, and how do we move forward? Because we have been Negro, colored, Black. Jesse Jackson said African American. Now they're calling us people of color. So who's doing all this naming? When are we going to decide for ourselves who we are and how we live, instead of looking for somebody else to do that for us?
Well, I agree with what you said, that at our core, everybody traces their origin to the continent, right? But such a thorough job has been done to denigrate Africa so much that people hesitate, to put it mildly, to claim Africa. And enough work has not been done yet to reach the masses to share, enlightened information about Africa's contribution to the 404 of human history. Because if we were to do that, then we could overcome, some of the negatives that have been put forth about Africa that causes, even some people on the continent now, to no longer want to refer to themselves as African. They would define themselves as, Muslim, or, a Christian, or some subcategory, as opposed to embracing their African reality. But the reality is, as you point out, everybody on earth traces their origin. Every human being, anyway, traces their origin to the continent. And if we use that in the most expansive and most meaningful way, then that becomes a opportunity then for us to continue arguing for African values as the foundation of our strategy and our code going forward. But it also gives us an opportunity not only to encourage other Black people to embrace those values and those codes, but ultimately everybody, right? Because every human being on Earth, if they trace their lineage back far enough, they end up on the continent. Am I mistaken? Am I wrong? That's the case. So the thing that we struggle with in the midst of all of this confusion, miseducation, and everything is, you know, people have been conditioned to put to stop at a certain point in their lineage, you know, when they look back at who they are. And I would ask, well, what point is that? What is the criteria? What's the formula that prompts people to stop going back far, you know, to only go to a certain point in their family tree? And clearly there is no formula. What it is the influences of racism, the domination, the cultural hegemony of the dominant society, European culture that has come forward and denigrated everything about Africa and caused even African people to feel bad about associating with it to some extent. So we have to overcome that by connecting with people where they are. And in my thoughts on it, I've always felt that one of the most potentially effective ways to go about that, particularly with our people, because our people are, you know, deeply religious, for better or worse, would be to, you know, have a program where we inform people in a constructive way about the true African origins of their religious traditions. You know, our people embrace those unlike any other people on earth, right? So if we could effectively teach our people about the origins of the Christ concept, for example, and the source of the teachings in the Psalms and all of those things and how they go back to Kemet, you know, then I think that provides a great opportunity for us to meet our people where they are and for them to see some meaningful value in African culture in a way that they might want to embrace it and not only learn more about the origin of their religious traditions, but learn more about Africa, African culture, and what it has to offer us more broadly today.
My question is, if I could do a poll, I would like to know why we don't read. We have so many scholars that have done so much work. They have spent their whole lives digging and digging and digging and even finding, you know, sometimes if the person that if a white person didn't write it, we don't believe it. But we've had scholars, myself included, that dug and found even these white scholars are admitting these things that our Black scholars are saying are true. They're even admitting it. Why is it that we would rather grasp something outside of ourselves than to sit down and read and find out about our story? Why are so many of us like that?
Well, I was about to disagree with you completely until you closed. When you closed and said, why are so many of us like that? That take on it I can go with. I reject most all of us phrases. You know, why don't we do this and that? And why don't we do things like other people? Because there are always exceptions to those things, right? Certainly it's true that our people, it could be said that our people don't read enough, but the notion that we don't read is, you know, just not true. We do read. I mean, if it's only 2 Black people on earth reading, it's me and you, right? So we know that we're not the only one. So one of the reasons I think that we don't read as much as we could or should read is because this myth that we don't read is perpetuated. And we don't expect that of each other. You know, as broadly as we should. Certainly, there are book circles, book clubs. Black people are united. Certainly, women do that on a continuous basis. So some of us are reading. It certainly could be said that not enough of us are reading, or it could be said that we aren't reading the right things in terms of the types of things that will help us to develop a general, elevated conception of who we are as a people so we can change our condition. But it's important to begin with that, because if we don't acknowledge that some of us aren't caught up in the way that others are, then we can't find the inspiration, to go forward. So we have to acknowledge that plenty of us are reading. And what we need to do is make a better connection between the material and the way that we reach people, because there are always going to be people who aren't going to be as prone to picking up a book as I might be. We don't all learn the same way. And I think there's a responsibility that those of us who know have to, be creative to reach the people who we know need to be reached with this material. So whereas it may be a challenge to get our people, some of our people, to pick up a 100, 200, 300, 400 page book, it's a lot easier to get them to sit down in front of a 2-hour documentary, a 1-hour documentary. So we have to, those of us who know, have to develop the expertise or team up with the people who have that expertise so that we can meet our people where they are. Nobody else is going to do this for us, right? We already know that it hasn't happened. So the responsibility is on us, those who know, to find a way to reach those people. That doesn't mean that it's our obligation to open up their head and put the information in, not in a literal sense anyway, but we know the ways that we are being misled, right? And we have to be willing to use those same methods to reach our people. I used to say in my study group that I don't have a problem tricking somebody into consciousness. You know what I mean? I mean, we've been tricked out of it. So if I gotta mislead you to get you to follow me to a certain point so that you can get something that's gonna open up your mind, well, I'm gonna do that all day, every day. If that's what works. Certainly our people are being tricked out of consciousness. Some of them are so tricked out of consciousness that they don't want to hear any of this conscious conversation. I can't go to them shedding light. I got to go to them with a strategy, in order to be able to meet them where they are, to build on what they know. So we have to be more expansive in our thinking, I believe, and more creative in our efforts to reach out to people. And we certainly got to get on the technology game and, be able to reach people there, because that's where, particularly young people, that's where so much attention is focused right now. And, even though we are engaging them there, we are not doing that at the level that we need to, I believe, in order to gain the results that are so important for us right now and going forward.
Well, and I definitely agree with what you're saying. With social media, a lot of us, we learn different ways. Some of us are kinetic, some of us are visual, audio, we have different ways of learning. But with the COVID going on and a lot of people being at home and finding things to do, and this is in my opinion, this is a perfect time to really take a good look at some things that you never would have been able to look at. So even though COVID has created complete chaos, it's also given you the opportunity to sit down and really evaluate your life, yourself, and how you think. And this is a great time. I watch a lot of documentaries, a lot. I mean, I'm just like I can binge on documentaries, and I don't just watch them and say, oh, that's true. I'll take notes because I want to go back and research and make sure that information is correct. Because in order to find out who we are, we have to stop letting other people define us And we have to stop looking for somebody else to save us. We don't have any friends. We have to save ourselves. In order to save ourselves, who are we saving?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to look
Yeah.
at who we are. And so when I listen to all these different people, and sometimes they, one person says, oh, they're this and they're that. I don't listen to all that. I'm a
Yeah.
thinker, independent thinker, and I can make my own decision, and I may find some truth with this one and that one. But that one question, because we do need to unify. We have to unify. And
Yeah.
for some people, that's frightening. But it's not frightening when other people do it. It's only frightening when we do it. But we must do it to so that we can move forward.
Yeah. I agree. And I would say I think one of the reasons that is frightening for us, if it is in fact frightening for us, is because we've been working so hard at it. At least we perceive ourselves to have been working so hard at it for so long, yet we haven't had the success that we think we need, or at least we've been told that we haven't had that success. So I think there's a perception that goes along with that it's impossible because what we've been doing hasn't worked for us, and that begs a question and an analysis of what we're doing and how we're doing it, which ultimately focuses in on that term we. Who is we? Who are we? In every way of analyzing that term. And we've become conditioned to see ourselves as a race of people, Black people, right? Where our unity is supposed to be derived from our shared experience, which, is reflected in a shared set of physical characteristics. And we've been attempting to unite around that now for decades, if not centuries. And that strategy hasn't worked for us yet, right? So what we've continued to do is to keep trying to unite around that same premise. And we still haven't had the success, which causes us, many times to want to just throw in the towel. This is hopeless. What we should do instead is give some focused attention to that strategy, that ideology that's at the foundation of it, and ask ourselves, first of all, is that our ideology? Did that idea of skin color based identity come from us? Well, if that didn't come from us, then should we be so surprised that it doesn't work for us? It is absolutely working well for somebody, right?
Us.
The people who conceived it and the descendants who they've left in power, it's working very well for them. So if we look at it then in that perspective, what we find is that we have been trying to unite around ideology that's not ours. It is, in fact, our enemies, our opponents' strategy that has been working for them because it was designed to work for them. We've been trying to borrow that and use that as the basis for our unity, and it hasn't worked for us. And I can offer an opinion on why it hasn't worked for us that goes beyond the fact that it's not inherently our strategy, that it's our enemy strategy. It's because our history, our shared skin color or complexion or shared race and all that ultimately is only a point of reference for our unity, for our efforts to be unified. It's only a point of reference. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that in any Black-based organization you can find anywhere, your Blackness alone is not enough for your acceptance and continued involvement. It may be enough to get you in the door the first time. But in any meaningful organization, after you breach the threshold and walk in, somebody's going to approach you. And they're going to want to know who you are. And they're going to want to know something about you. And they're going to want to know something about your history. And they might ask you for some references, right? Because what they're trying to ascertain is who you are as a person. who you are as a person. What are your values? What are your interests? What are the things that make you tick? What are your thought processes? It's not just your history that defines whether you can be united with them. It's your values and how you engage the world and what you can contribute, right? We've been trying to unite around this notion of race, even though in all of our functional uniting and unification, our shared values and interests going forward is what unites. So if we could understand that and could develop a strategy around uniting based on shared values, right? Instead of around shared history or leaving that as a reference, a necessary reference. I'm not diminishing that. I'm saying that it needs to be put in its proper place in terms of how we develop strategy going forward. Your skin color, your history doesn't matter to me ultimately if we don't if we don't have shared values. If your values are going to cause you to undertake acts that take away from the community, that violate me or people I care about, your skin color is of no concern to me. I need you gone, right? Just like if we can be united towards our common interests going forward, I would love for you to look like me. I would love for you to have a shared history with me. But if we're going to win, I only need to be concerned about what you can do towards those shared goals we have. And if you can be a contributor towards those shared goals, I would be a damn fool not to unite with you because we don't have a similar or a shared history. Because life is about what is happening going forward, what we're going into, right? So that's what we need to be looking forward with all of this. That's not to say don't look back, but put that view in the proper perspective.
You know, and that's true because, you know, we just had the anniversary of Chairman Fred Hampton's murder, and it was his bodyguard, someone that he trusted with his life, that set up the whole thing, that murdered a 21-year-old prince, you know, a king in the making. There's always been infiltrators, you know,
and always will be.
There always will be, always will be. And so, you know, that term, you know, there's a term that it's all skin folk ain't kin folk.
That's right.
That's
right.
It's very true.
Let me add this too. Indeed, and let me add this too, because we are struggling against racism, right? So it would seem that the solution would destroy that whole notion that our unity is supposed to be based strictly on, you know, who we look like. That's European ideology, right? We didn't operate like that prior to our experience with oppression, right? And it's been said, and I believe it's true, that you haven't been truly defeated until you take on the ways of your oppressor, right? And that's not to say that we need to be altruistic and foolhardy, you know, about the way we go about it, overly generous. You know, perhaps it could be argued we've done that in the past. I'm not arguing for that. But most certainly, if we're going to defeat this racist system that we're struggling against, we can't be looking to construct a different version of it, right? Am I missing something?
No, you know, Pablo Fier, and I may be saying the name wrong, but in his work, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, said there comes a time when the oppressed become the oppressor. And we certainly see that, especially in Southern California. And the reason why I bring that up is because, you know, just like the Liberical Americans that went over into Liberia from the Garvey movement, they went over there, and what did they do with the Aboriginals there, the natives there? They mistreated. So what happens is it becomes a sickness in your mind. And I'm getting ready to do a workshop on Wednesday where I'm going to talk about the microaggressions of people of color to basically, you know, highly melanated Aboriginal foundational Black Americans. There is there are many microaggressions. And so the reason why I bring this up is it's hard to, this is why we meet people, we think they, but hey, I'm vibing with you, let's do this work together. But in this country, the dollar is God. It's God. And if someone comes with you with the right dollar, you will do whatever it is, some people, not all. A lot of people cannot be bought. But some will say,
Yeah,
okay, well, if you take this charge off of me, I'll do this. Well, if you pay me this, I'll do this. And I don't know how they sleep at night knowing that they just helped continue the demise of your own people. We,
yeah,
according to Freire, we basically, when you've been living under an oppressive system your whole life, that's really with no intervention, that's what you know. And that's what
yeah,
you repeat. When I went to Tanzania, there were 17 of us, and I actually witnessed a few of them talking down to the Tanzanians. It pissed me off. I had to say something
yeah,
because just because you're American, we're in their country. We're home. Why are you treating them like you get treated when you're in Alabama?
yeah,
Why do you do that? And so that arrogance, that individualistic uh, culture that is America,
yeah,
that's a big problem for us. If we were naturally are a collectivist culture. We take care of Big Mama. We take care of each other. And now there's an attack against us as a family unit. There's an attack against us. I don't have to
yeah,
point out where those attacks are. They're right in our faces every day. That nuclear family is being attacked.
yeah,
Relationships are being attacked. This is all a part of a structure to maintain the status quo. It's
yeah,
just it's just under a different ideology, a different philosophy, and we've got to be sharp enough to recognize it when we see it.
yeah, yeah, yes. And it comes in overt and subtle ways,
Yes.
but it's an ongoing attack against our efforts to rediscover ourselves in our fullness, right? And since we're going into the Kwanzaa season, and this is a relevant example, I'll share this. I just noticed that a new Kwanzaa stamp was issued this year, and I think the post office does that every year. I think almost.
Yes.
And this is the second or third year that I recall taking note of how the artwork on the Kwanzaa stamp was a violation of the teachings of Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is a celebration of family, community, and culture. Yet once again, the post office has commissioned artwork that only shows a Black woman. And that's not the first time that they've done that. So I offer that as an example of the subtle type of attacks that we see. Of course, the overt ones we see, on film with, police officers, police with police drones, I call them, with their knees on our necks. We see that, played out in real time. But the more subtle attacks sometimes can go without being noticed, but they are just as pervasive, and their subtlety allows them to get into our subconscious in a way that the more overt attacks don't. And that's where so much of the damage is done. We find ourselves, we could easily find ourselves playing along to conditioned thought that we haven't even given any conscious thought to, right? And the way, in the example that I just offered, the way that the message, the community focus, the family focus of Kwanzaa is misrepresented in the official stamp from the post office every year. That's just a subtle example of how that that conditioning gets in there, and then it comes out in ways that ultimately are not in our best interest.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's a serious push. We talk about who we are. There's such as being a Black woman. I'm very proud of what Black women have done and are doing, and I'm proud of us moving forward and creating businesses and doing a lot of great work.
Yes.
But we cannot. I do not see. I cannot subscribe to the pushing of that without pushing our men. I
Yeah.
cannot subscribe to that because what I'm saying, you know, looking at there were some commercials where they show the family, you know, the white family had the man, the husband, the wife, and the kids, and the Latino family had the husband, the wife, and the kids, and then the black family just had the mother and the kids with no husband.
Yeah.
These subtle things that they, you know, like you probably look at it and say, oh, that's okay. Or, you know, there's a lot of, and no disrespect to my sisters, but there's a lot of Zooms for Black women, you know, Black women collective, Black women this, and I applaud you. But where I have a problem is where are the Zooms for Black couples? Where are the Zooms for the family? Where are the it's almost like it's that destruction that I think a lot of
Yeah.
people aren't really looking at, which is one of the reasons, and I'm sure somebody is going to eventually ask, I'll answer it right now. Why do I have so many brothers on my shows so far? Is because I want you to see that brothers are here, they're present, they're doing things, they're intellectual, they're working, they're raising their kids. I have a great respect for our men as I do our sisters. And I think that we need to listen to what they have to say. We are some of us are under the impression that that brothers don't want sisters, and that's not true. 80 to 90% of brothers do, you know, but what's thrown in our face through the media is that swirling. That's what's thrown to us in the
Yeah.
media. And so if you are not a critical thinker, these images that they keep throwing at you, that's what you'll believe. And you'll back up from what your true calling
Yeah.
is we can't rise up. We can't come together. We can't unify. This is one of the challenges to our unity. How do we
Yes.
unify and become on code and become self-sufficient and self-reliable, which may scare other people, but they're self-sufficient and they're self-reliable. How do we do that if we're not coming together and laying it cards on the table and saying, okay, we've got to do better?
Yeah.
Who are we? Who are we
Yeah.
without you? And who are you all without us?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what you're talking about is the distinction between what could be described as a womanist perspective versus a feminist perspective, right? The feminist perspective comes out of the feminist movement, which was, you know, to summarize it, an effort for led by white women to get their share of what white men had, right? And as that has evolved, it has never reconnected with a more holistic understanding of woman's interests, right? Womanism, on the other hand, is grounded in a self-understanding that is connected to family and community, not an individualistic, let me get what's best for me type of thing, or let women get what's best for women type of thing. A womanist perspective is grounded in ultimately what is best for the family, what is best for the community, and that certainly doesn't exclude what is best for a woman or for the woman, right? So that's a cultural reconnection, because womanism, Dr. Kenora Hudson Weems, from, I think she's at the University of Missouri, she is the founding theorist of Africana womanism. And in her work, she talks extensively about the notion of womanhood being grounded in the sense of community and family, and how operating from that is the most informed way to go forward for women, certainly women in our community. But this is a multi-level conversation, right? Because even while all of those things are true that I just said about the distinction between womanism and feminism, the fact of the matter is that women have some righteous complaints about brothers, about Black men historically, and even today. That's not to suggest that the claims that we hear about all Black men are valid or should be given some consideration to, because of course it's not true. But there are some righteous complaints to be made. In other words, brothers got some work to do. right? That doesn't justify brothers being excluded from the equation, right? And for our issues not to be given proper attention, for us not to be rightfully included in leadership equations and stuff like that. That's one of the matters with the Black Lives Matter movement right now. They purposely express how they are focusing on woman and queer leadership as if to exclude the Black man, as if to respond to the imbalance of patriarchy in this society by taking on, by creating a model of opposite imbalance, as if that's the ultimate solution. And I don't resonate with that. But if we were properly balanced, we would have you doing as you're doing, looking to uplift and advance a conversation about brothers and the contributions that brothers are making. That would be matched by a conversation from brothers celebrating sisters and the work that women are doing, and acknowledging that our standing for whatever that means today is largely attributable to the work that our women have done, and the fact that our women have never given up on us. So there is something to be said about that, and the balance from us recognizing you and our women and what you all have done, and you all doing that for us in return. So when we get to that situation, then I think we'll be heading in the direction that we need to go.
Trust me, brother. I have that on the curriculum. I have that on the list. We're definitely going to have that conversation. Well, I want to bring some brothers and sisters together, and I want to have that show, and I want them to have that conversation because I'm a healer, so I need us to heal.
Can I offer a perspective too related to that? Because I think we're running out of time, and I did want to get to this because I think the conversation that we had about whether we need leadership or inspiration is perfectly consistent with this, right? Because we've been conditioned to look for the next great leader, right? And let's be honest, when we're looking for the next great leader, we're looking for the next great male leader, because that's how we've been conditioned, through our religious teachings and through our experience. When we talk about the next great leader, we're looking for a male far more often than not. As I said earlier, I argue that it's not leadership that we need, it's inspiration. Inspiration that comes from us being fed the proper information and the right amount of it. And with that, when we get to the point where we are looking for proper inspiration, then, and from that perspective, we can begin to develop a higher appreciation for our women. Because I maintain, and I think most brothers I know would agree with me, that there is no single greater inspiration on earth than a Black woman. And that's not just for me as a Black man. Mm-hmm. When I look at the relationships that Black women have with each other, I see where Black women inspire each other like no other, right? Black women get more inspiration from each other than from any other source. And without a question, Black men are inspired by Black women more than anything else. So if we recognize that what we are looking for is inspiration that will then inspire us to lead ourselves, then the role of women, of Black women, in that equation just got multiplied, right? Because nobody in their right mind is going to argue with me that there is no single greater source of inspiration available to us as Black people than our Black women.
Absolutely. The first, Angela Davis was the first woman that I read the whole autobiography. I was really into everything she said. When she spoke, I had to be there. She was the first one. I had learned of others, but then I learned about the Fannie Lou Hamers, and then I learned about, the Claude Bethune, and I learned, they only teach you about Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Dr. King. It's the same people, safe people. They're safe. So we're going to let you know about that, but we're not going to let you know about these warrior women. We're not going to let you know about, the maroon women. We're not going to let you know uh, about, there's so much information that now in a age of technology, we're learning a lot of history, our story that wasn't available before. It's all coming out now. So now you really have to question everything that you've been taught. And most of us have been taught barely anything. And if we're not taught about us, then other groups they don't know any more than we do. And so they're judging us based on what they've been, everybody has been programmed to believe, and so that doesn't make it good for us or anyone else. But again, you know, uh, the question still remains. We know we're brilliant. We know that we're the originators of so much. We know that we're spiritual. We know that we're strong, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we're so strong that we don't hurt,
Yes.
that we don't feel pain. Even in the healthcare system, when we tell you we're hurting, they ignore us because they think we're just some big brute that we don't feel pain, and we're just, a lot of people don't even realize how gynecology started. Those sisters
Yeah.
weren't put to sleep. They were wide awake and had their insides turned inside out. There's so much
Yeah.
that we don't know. But the question still remains, with all that history, excuse me, our story. Even if, to the audience, if you don't know our story, I'll be more than happy if you comment below. I will give you some books to start with. Uh, we'll give you some information. All I have to do is comment. I'll put it out there. But the question still remains. We have these challenges during this crisis. The good of this crisis is only that it is forcing us to look
Yeah.
at ourselves and figure out what we need to do. But this time we can't do like my generation, you know, the civil rights movement, which should have been the human rights movement, that happened. And then they got some government jobs and some changes, but we didn't benefit really from them. Other people did. And so we thought we had made it. And so my generation didn't feel that we had to fight anymore. And then when we started looking at Malcolm, and looking at the teachings and really, digesting that, we came up with X-Clan and Poor Righteous Teachers and,
Mhm.
KRS-One, then crack.
Yeah.
So every time we wake up, it's heroin. That's what happened to the Black Panther Party. They create problems with us, the US organization. Then it's bringing crack because they're starting to wear the African medallions. The Black Power movement is coming back, and so our generation just like, okay, well, we're going to jail, we're having crack, okay. So we didn't do anything. So now you see we have these keyboard warriors. Everybody's on the keyboard being a keyboard revolutionary. But talk is cheap. We need
Yeah.
tangibles. In this
Yeah.
election, we said, I personally, no tangibles, that's me. My thoughts are my thoughts and my life is my life. But during this crisis, Gil Scott Heron said, either we're going to be unified or unity is going to be forced upon us. Before unity has to be forced upon us, who are we? Let's
Yeah.
let's let's have a conversation outside of this show about who we are. And I'm not
Yeah.
talking about where you belong. I'm not talking about if you're a Delta or an AKA. That's not even that's secondary. I'm not talking about if you're a Baptist or a Lutheran, that's secondary. Muslim,
Yeah.
secondary. Who
Yeah.
are you first? What is the
Yeah.
thing that you cannot escape, that you were born with, that you're going to die with? Who are we? And
Yeah.
I'll let you close it out.
Well, I don't think there's a more important question to ask. Who are we, and to give some depthful thought to that, because that informs everything, right? Your identity provides direction and purpose, how you exist in the world. So, how do I want to close? I would close just hoping that the added challenges that have been posed by this pandemic will create the unquenchable inspiration within us to build that higher level of unity, to look within ourselves first and see what we need to adjust within ourselves, in order to improve our condition. Because we can say as much as we want to say about the problems that we face and where they came from and who's responsible for those, but then none of that changes the fact that we have to save ourselves. Regardless of what the problems are, the solution will only come from us. So in my judgment, that begins with a depthful understanding of who we are, an elevated conception of who we are. If you're one of the responses that I got most frequently, matter of fact, this may have been the most frequent response to the question I asked when I asked people, what does blackness mean to you? Most often I got a definition grounded in our history and our experience as an oppressed people. And if our understanding of ourselves is tied to that, well, oppressed people don't typically lead the world. They don't typically take control of their destiny and direction. Oppressed people tend to be oppressed. So if our conception of ourselves is grounded in our history of oppression, as opposed to being grounded in the much more extensive history that preceded our oppression, then we're not going to get much further than we are now. So we need an elevated conception of blackness. We need an elevated understanding of who we are so that the unity that we seek can be built around something elevating, right? I mean, we can unite around all of these diminished conceptions of who we are, but what is that going to do for us except create more problems that we're going to have to try to find a solution to? So an elevated conception of who we are. I draw from the teachings of Kawaida, Dr. Karega, Kwanzaa, and Nguzo Saba, and their foundation in the best of African thought and practice. We're not limited in where we draw from, except that we draw from African history and culture. So I draw from that to inform my perspective on all of the things that I've shared here today. And I believe that is a reasonable, if not the best, foundation that's been laid, I believe, for us to go forward with the perspective, the knowledge, and the inspiration that we need to change ourselves.
Absolutely. If you're interested in the African Restoration Project, please leave a comment below and make sure that you get that information. Give them the website again to your, he's wearing one of them now.
Yeah, my website is easy to get to. My Kwanzaa-based website is kwanzaa.net. Or you could also go to kwanzaa.org, or you could go to kwanzaa.shop. All three of those are going to take you to the same website. If you want my website for my consulting company, that is ddandp.com. That's virtual design and prototyping. So it's ddandp.com. And that gives you some information on my company and some past projects and things like that. A little bit more info on me.
I'm all about, making sure that we support each other. Kwanzaa is coming up, and every year Harrell Kagler Interventions has our Kwanzaa Vision Board Workshop. We will have our third Kwanzaa Vision Board Workshop this year. Of course, because of the Rona, it's virtual. It will be on December 27th. If you want that information, I could send you an Eventbrite. Please put something in the comments below and let us know if you're interested. We are hkinterventions.org, hkinterventions.org. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you want real talk, if you want things that really matter to the community, somebody's got to do it. So we're going to do it. I mean, no one's, you have plenty of people that you can listen to, but we're going to tell it like it is and give you that information because we're all about empowering our community. And again, I am Dr. J. Harrell Sims. And, people, this was an excellent conversation. We're going to have more of them. Absolutely. Forever forward, never backwards. Peace, Hotep, Shalom. We're out.